In the heart of New England, the arrival of winter often brings a profound stillness. The landscape is transformed by heavy snowfall, blanketing the towns in a pristine layer of white that seems to quiet the world. Newtown, Connecticut, in the 1980s, was the epitome of this idyllic American setting. It was a place characterized by winding country roads, colonial homes, and a tight-knit community where neighbors looked out for one another. It was a picturesque haven for professionals commuting to larger cities, offering a safe, tranquil environment to raise a family. But beneath the serene surface of a winter storm in November of 1986, a profound tragedy was unfolding. It was a case that would shatter the quiet of Newtown, challenge the fundamental limits of forensic science, and forever alter the landscape of the American justice system. This is the story of Helle Crafts, a dedicated mother and respected professional whose sudden disappearance led investigators down a path of unprecedented scientific discovery. Helle Nielsen was born and raised in Denmark. Those who knew her described her as vibrant, intelligent, and deeply compassionate. Seeking a life of travel and professional fulfillment, she became a flight attendant for Pan American World Airways, a prestigious position that allowed her to see the world. Helle was a cosmopolitan woman, fluent in multiple languages, and admired for her grace and professionalism. During her travels, she met Richard Crafts, a pilot for Eastern Airlines, who had previously served as a pilot in the military. To the outside observer, they were the perfect aviation couple. They married, settled in the peaceful enclave of Newtown, and had 3 children. They appeared to be living the American dream, complete with successful careers, a beautiful home, and a growing family. However, the facade of their perfect suburban life concealed a deeply troubled reality. As the years passed, the dynamics of their marriage deteriorated. Richard was frequently absent, a circumstance initially attributed to his demanding schedule as a commercial pilot. But Helle, observant and intuitive, began to notice troubling inconsistencies. There were unexplained financial anomalies, missing funds, and a growing emotional distance. Richard had also taken on a role as a part-time auxiliary police officer in a neighboring town, a position that afforded him a uniform, a sense of authority, and access to law enforcement resources. Despite his respectable public persona, his private behavior grew increasingly erratic and deceitful. Helle eventually discovered undeniable evidence of her husband's infidelities. Recognizing that her marriage was irreparably broken, she made the difficult but courageous decision to seek a divorce. She was determined to protect her children and secure a stable future for them. Understanding the complexities of her situation, she hired a private investigator named Keith Mayo to document Richard's activities. Mayo successfully gathered photographic evidence of Richard's extramarital affairs, providing Helle with the necessary documentation to proceed with the divorce. But Helle was not naive to the potential risks of confronting a spouse who was accustomed to control and possessed a background in law enforcement. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, she confided in her closest friends and colleagues. She shared her plans to serve Richard with divorce papers and expressed a profound, unsettling fear. She told multiple friends that if anything were to happen to her, they should not assume it was an accident. This chilling foresight would soon become the catalyst for one of the most exhaustive investigations in criminal history. On November 18, 1986, a massive winter storm, known locally as a nor'easter, began to bear down on the region. Helle had just returned from a long international flight from Frankfurt, Germany. Friends and colleagues had spoken to her that day, confirming she was exhausted but safely home. That evening, as the snow accumulated rapidly, effectively shutting down the town of Newtown, Helle Crafts vanished. When Helle failed to show up for her next scheduled flight, a highly unusual occurrence for the meticulous professional, her friends immediately grew alarmed. They contacted Richard, who offered a series of shifting and contradictory explanations. He told one friend that Helle had unexpectedly flown to Denmark to visit her mother. He told another that she was vacationing with a friend in the Canary Islands. To others, he claimed he simply did not know where she was and assumed she would return eventually. Helle's friends, remembering her ominous warnings, refused to accept these dismissive excuses. They knew Helle would never abandon her 3 young children, nor would she miss a scheduled flight without notifying her employer. They immediately contacted the local police department to report her missing. They also reached out to Keith Mayo, the private investigator Helle had hired, who immediately suspected foul play. The initial phase of the investigation was fraught with complications. Richard Crafts was a part-time police officer, and he leveraged his familiarity with law enforcement protocols to deflect suspicion. He passed a standard polygraph test, an outcome that temporarily stalled local investigative efforts. Polygraph examinations, while useful as investigative tools, measure physiological responses to stress, not truthfulness itself. Individuals with specific training, a highly controlled demeanor, or a lack of emotional response can sometimes produce inconclusive or false negative results. Richard's calm, detached demeanor during questioning led some local authorities to believe his assertion that his wife had simply walked away from a failing marriage. However, the relentless advocacy of Helle's friends and the private investigator forced the case forward. They continued to pressure authorities, pointing out the glaring inconsistencies in Richard's stories and the sheer impossibility of Helle leaving her children behind. Recognizing the growing complexity and the potential conflict of interest, the local authorities eventually requested the assistance of the Connecticut State Police Major Crime Squad. This transition marked a pivotal turning point in the pursuit of justice for Helle Crafts. When the state police took over, they approached the disappearance not as a simple missing persons case, but as a potential homicide. They obtained a warrant to search the Crafts' residence, bringing a new level of rigorous scrutiny to the investigation. The forensic team meticulously examined the home, looking for any physical evidence that could explain Helle's sudden absence. During the search, detectives noticed several highly suspicious details. A large section of carpeting in the master bedroom had been recently removed and replaced. When questioned, Richard claimed he had spilled kerosene on the rug and had to throw it away. However, forensic technicians utilized chemical reagents that detect the presence of proteins and iron, revealing faint, microscopic traces of biological material on the mattress and the floorboards beneath where the carpet used to be. While the quantity was incredibly small, it was the first tangible indicator that a traumatic event had occurred within the home. Simultaneously, financial investigators were auditing Richard's recent purchases. The paper trail revealed a sequence of transactions that painted a deeply disturbing picture. In the days immediately surrounding Helle's disappearance, Richard had purchased a large chest freezer, which was not found in the home. He had also purchased a brand new chainsaw and heavy-duty trash bags. Most alarmingly, credit card receipts showed that on the day after the massive snowstorm, Richard had rented a large, industrial-sized wood chipper, the kind typically used by municipal road crews to clear large trees and heavy brush. The investigative team now faced a horrifying hypothesis regarding the disposal method. But hypotheses are not evidence, and the burden of proof in a court of law requires establishing the facts beyond a reasonable doubt. The concept of corpus delicti, a Latin term meaning the body of the crime, traditionally meant that prosecutors needed to present the physical body of the victim to prove a murder had taken place. While convictions without a body were not entirely unprecedented in 1986, they were extraordinarily rare and incredibly difficult to achieve. The defense could simply argue that the victim was still alive and had chosen to disappear. To counter this, the state police needed to find incontrovertible physical proof of Helle's demise. The breakthrough came from a seemingly ordinary citizen going about his job. A municipal snowplow driver named Joseph Hine came forward with a crucial piece of information. He reported that during the height of the November blizzard, in the early hours of the morning, he had been clearing the roads near Lake Zoar, a large reservoir bordered by dense woods. In the freezing darkness, he had seen a U-Haul truck towing a large industrial woodchipper parked on a bridge over the river. He noted the sighting because it was highly unusual for anyone to be conducting tree-clearing operations in the middle of a severe winter storm. Armed with this specific location, the Connecticut State Police launched one of the most exhaustive and grueling forensic search operations in history. The banks of Lake Zoar and the surrounding river basin were covered in deep snow and ice. The search teams established rigorous grid patterns, treating the harsh winter landscape like a microscopic slide. They utilized industrial heaters and warm water to meticulously melt the snow bank by bank, carefully sifting through the resulting slush and mud. This arduous process required immense patience and dedication. For days, the search yielded nothing, but the investigators persevered, driven by a commitment to find the truth for Helle and her family. Finally, the meticulous grid search began to uncover microscopic anomalies in the environment. Investigators found a torn piece of paper with a name on it. It was an envelope that had been sent to Helle Crafts. This confirmed they were looking in the exact right location. The search intensified, bringing in specialized dive teams to scour the freezing waters beneath the bridge. The divers faced zero visibility and treacherous currents, relying entirely on touch as they swept the riverbed. Their efforts were rewarded when they recovered a chainsaw submerged in the murky water. The chainsaw's serial numbers had been deliberately filed off, a clear attempt to obscure its origin. The evidence collected from the banks of Lake Zoar was transported to the Connecticut State Police Forensic Science Laboratory, under the direction of the renowned forensic scientist Dr. Henry Lee. Dr. Lee and his team faced an unprecedented challenge. They did not have a body. Instead, they had thousands of tiny, seemingly unrecognizable fragments recovered from the mud and snow. The forensic analysis conducted in this case remains a landmark in the history of criminal investigation. Dr. Lee's team approached the evidence with clinical precision. They categorized every single fragment, utilizing high-powered microscopes and advanced chemical analysis. Among the debris, they identified human hair. Microscopic comparison revealed that the hair was blonde and had been artificially colored, perfectly matching the known characteristics of Helle Crafts' hair. Furthermore, the hair shafts exhibited clean, angular cuts, consistent with being severed by a high-speed mechanical blade, rather than falling out naturally. The team also discovered a single human fingernail, painted with pink polish. The polish was chemically analyzed and matched to a bottle found in Helle's bathroom. They found tiny fragments of bone, which osteological experts identified as human. The most critical piece of evidence, however, was a dental fragment. It was a portion of a tooth containing a very specific metallic dental crown. Forensic odontology, the application of dental science to legal investigations, played a paramount role at this juncture. Dental records are incredibly unique to each individual, often serving as a primary method of identification when traditional means are not possible. Investigators obtained Helle Crafts' dental records from her dentist. The records detailed a highly specific, custom-made crown that had been placed on one of her teeth. The metallic composition and the exact physical dimensions of the recovered tooth fragment were a flawless, indisputable match to Helle's dental X-rays. This scientific confirmation proved beyond any doubt that the fragments recovered from the riverbank belonged to Helle Crafts. Meanwhile, forensic metallurgists were working on the chainsaw recovered from the river. When a serial number is stamped into metal, the impact compresses the molecular structure of the metal beneath the visible numbers. Even when the surface is filed away to erase the digits, the compressed metallic bonds below the surface remain altered. The scientists applied a specialized chemical acid etching technique to the filed area of the chainsaw. The acid reacted differently to the compressed metal than to the surrounding uncompressed metal, slowly revealing the hidden numbers like a ghost image. The restored serial number perfectly matched the receipt for the chainsaw Richard Crafts had purchased just days before his wife vanished. Furthermore, forensic technicians examined the rented woodchipper. By dismantling the machine and analyzing the internal housing, they discovered microscopic traces of human tissue and bone fragments that matched the biological profile of the evidence found at Lake Zoar. The mechanical tool marks found on the bone fragments recovered from the riverbank were compared to the blades of the woodchipper and the teeth of the chainsaw, creating a definitive mechanical link between the tools purchased and rented by the suspect and the fatal injuries sustained by the victim. Through tireless scientific deduction, Dr. Henry Lee and his team had established the incontrovertible truth. The total weight of the biological evidence recovered was less than 3 ounces. Yet, this microscopic collection of fragments, analyzed through the lens of rigorous forensic science, was enough to scientifically prove both the identity of the victim and the precise mechanical method of disposal. It was a monumental achievement that shifted the paradigm of criminal investigations. With the scientific evidence firmly established, the state prosecutor moved forward with charging Richard Crafts with the murder of his wife. The legal proceedings that followed were highly anticipated, drawing national attention due to the unprecedented nature of the forensic evidence. The prosecution faced the immense burden of explaining complex scientific principles to a jury, ensuring they understood that the absence of a complete body did not mean an absence of proof. The first trial began in 1988. The prosecution meticulously laid out their case, calling upon Dr. Henry Lee and a host of other scientific experts to testify. They presented the timeline, the financial records, the snowplow driver's testimony, and the undeniable forensic matches. They painted a picture of a calculated and methodical attempt to erase a human being from existence. The defense, in turn, attempted to cast doubt on the forensic methods, arguing that the small amount of evidence was insufficient to prove murder beyond a reasonable doubt, and maintained their stance that Helle could have simply left. Despite the overwhelming scientific evidence, the first trial ended in a hung jury. A single juror refused to vote for conviction, reportedly unable to overcome the traditional expectation of needing a physical body to prove murder. This outcome was a devastating blow to Helle's family, her friends, and the dedicated investigators who had worked tirelessly on the case. However, the legal system allows for a retrial in the event of a hung jury, and the prosecution remained resolute in their pursuit of justice. The second trial commenced in 1989. This time, the prosecution refined their presentation, focusing even more heavily on the absolute certainty of the forensic science. They utilized visual aids and clear, educational explanations to ensure the jury fully grasped the significance of the acid etching, the microscopic hair analysis, and the irrefutable dental match. They emphasized that science does not lie, and that the microscopic fragments recovered from Lake Zoar were just as conclusive as a complete physical form. The second jury deliberated with a clear understanding of the scientific facts presented before them. They recognized the cold, calculated nature of the cover-up and the undeniable truth revealed by the forensic laboratory. Richard Crafts was found guilty of murder. He was subsequently sentenced to 50 years in prison, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The conviction of Richard Crafts marked the very first time in the history of the state of Connecticut that a murder conviction was secured without the presence of a complete body. It set a profound legal precedent, establishing that advanced forensic science could bridge the gap previously required by the traditional interpretation of corpus delicti. The case demonstrated to the legal and law enforcement communities that perpetrators could no longer rely on the destruction of evidence to escape justice. If a crime occurred, science could find the traces left behind. The legacy of the Helle Crafts case extends far beyond the confines of a courtroom in Connecticut. It stands as a testament to the evolution of modern forensic science. The pioneering techniques utilized by Dr. Henry Lee and his team became foundational elements in criminal investigations worldwide. The meticulous grid searches, the microscopic analysis of trace evidence, the chemical restoration of obscured serial numbers, and the definitive application of forensic odontology showcased in this investigation are now standard procedures taught in forensic academies across the globe. Furthermore, the case brought a stark and necessary awareness to the realities of domestic violence. It highlighted the dangerous dynamics of control and deception that can exist behind the closed doors of seemingly perfect suburban homes. Helle Crafts was a vibrant, loving mother whose life was tragically cut short by the person she should have been able to trust the most. Her courage in seeking a better life for herself and her children, and her foresight in warning her friends, ultimately ensured that her voice was heard even after she was silenced. The relentless dedication of her friends, the private investigator, the state police, and the forensic scientists ensured that her perpetrator did not commit the perfect crime. They proved that no matter how thoroughly someone attempts to erase the evidence of their actions, the truth remains etched in the microscopic fragments of reality, waiting for science to bring it to light. As we reflect on the incredible scientific advancements born from this tragedy, and the tireless pursuit of truth that defined this historic investigation, we are left to consider the broader implications for our society. When the physical evidence is reduced to almost nothing, and the truth relies entirely on the meticulous application of science, how do we ensure that the justice system continues to evolve and adapt to uncover the truth hidden in the smallest of details?